feel like we should talk about the elephant in the room, or the horse in the room, if you will. Let's just go there. Let's just do it. Let's talk about it.
Lord.
This whole thing. I mean, I'm gonna call it a de-gusanoer. For people who don't know, gusano means worm in Spanish. It's also a term used for people who leave Cuba for political reasons as opposed to economic refugees. But these de-gusanos, what is the deal? We have a lot of people, and I bring this up also, and I'm really glad that you're here, Adam, because it's not inconceivable that people have the right to be, and they have good reason to be suspicious of pharmaceuticals and the pharmaceutical industry. And a lot of people will bring up if I bring up the vaccine, they're like, what about them being able to be sued? Should we be fighting for that? Because they have all these protections. And so let's talk about the vaccine, and what do you have to say to people who are like, well, the vaccine is not good for you. It's it's a way to get people. I don't know. What are the theories? Well, there's one that the vaccine isn't good. Then another theory is that the de-gusanoer is good, and it's just getting a raw deal. Can you just explore some of those and respond to them?
Absolutely. So I don't know. Let's start with the vaccine. I mean, so let's start with the issue you raised, which is like skepticism at the pharmaceutical industry. I'm skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, I want to see, massive transformation, and actually publicly funded healthcare, pharmaceutical research to keep drugs in the public domain. But the fact of the matter is that's not quite how it works right now. And the pharmaceutical drugs, medications are very valuable and important to us. And the fact that they're made by profit maximizing firms doesn't mean that they are not valuable products, right? Think about all the things that we've commoditized in the United States. Think about all the things that are commoditized under our version of capitalism. Obviously, there's a useful things, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about redistributing them, right? If the only thing that was commoditized was goop stuff, then which is commoditized. It doesn't matter as much, right? And the whole point of moving towards national health insurance, the whole point is because these are privatized services. These are things that are treated as commodities that actually should be made public and treated as social goods, right? And so that's why we want to do that. If we didn't want to do that, if they weren't valuable, we wouldn't want to do that. So just a sort of general way to think about this maybe slight lack of comfort that some people have about, well, I'm sort of furious at sort of the greed and everything else the pharmaceutical companies do, but okay. So there's that. Okay. Second question is the efficacy of the vaccines. Look, the vaccines have been rolled out in an enormous number of people. Safety profile is extremely good. Serious adverse reactions are extraordinarily rare. And COVID is not extraordinarily rare. It's extremely common. And the fact is, despite all the discussion about breakthrough infections, yada, 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 the efficacy of the vaccines against hospitalization, death, ICU stays, having to deal with people like me, the vaccine efficacy.
Now you're disincentivizing her, Adam. No one's going to get the vaccine now.
Right.
No, and it has been maintained at over 90%. So by simply getting the vaccine, you are basically giving yourself a potential get out of death-free card. Okay, so we need to really push that message, and that's been there's been a lot of misinformation about that. Now, to talk about ivermectin for a moment. So the fact is, look, I want more medications that work against COVID. We don't have enough. We have some. There have been some that have been shown to be useful. Steroids and a couple other medications we don't need to get into for critically ill patients. Obviously, the kinds of things we do in the ICU can help some patients get through a life-threatening bout of COVID. But we want more medications. I would love it if this medication worked, right? I would be the first to use it if it worked. But the evidence base for it is very shoddy. Now, there were trials that were positive. And this led to some thought, well, maybe there's something here. When people have actually looked into some of the trials that really gave a lot of the apparent support, like one of the big ones is very shady, very shoddy, and was actually ultimately retracted. Okay, and they had to there's something called a meta-analysis, which is when you combine a lot of trials into one to sort of shed more light on the problem. And they actually, once you took that trial out, the meta-analysis, which people had used to sort of say this was an effective treatment, actually no longer showed what they thought it showed. So that's That's what's going on. Meanwhile, there are some very pernicious actors, and I don't know what their motivation is, but that are out there and that are pushing this drug as a vaccine substitute. The FLCCC, which is a coalition of, I guess, critical care doctors, have been, putting this out there. One of them testified in front of the Senate at the request of a Republican senator, and they are making this sound like a vaccine substitute. If you go to their website, they actually, for their prevention for COVID protocol, it has all these funny things like mouthwash and ivermectin and this and that. It doesn't even mention vaccines. So there's something shady happening there. And I am furious about this because people are believing this, and they are taking this as a substitute for the vaccine, and some of them are dying. And you just need to go onto Google News and read about those cases. And what a tragedy! What a complete and unnecessary loss of life. And it makes me so upset. I think shaming. I think shaming or ridicule of people who may, as I said earlier, who make decisions is totally not my game. We probably all engage in things that make no sense, right? Health-wise, we all take things that we heard about might help this, that, whatever. It's just it's universal to human nature. What I do take issue with is the sort of purveyors and the prominent people who are making this into their brand and are way out of their depth. In terms of the evidence, I don't know what they truly believe in their heart of hearts. I don't care that much because I think that whether or not in the final analysis ivermectin shows some modest benefit, which it could, that's not going to make it a substitute for vaccines at all, not even in the slightest. And the fact is that a big trial done by a respected group out of McMaster University was preliminary results reported, and that's showing no effect whatsoever. So it's not looking good for this medication. Again, I hope it works, but it's unlikely it does, and we don't. And certainly it's looking worse as each day goes onward. And again, there's this epidemiologist out of Australia, Gideon Meyerowitz Kurt. I may have mangled his name actually, so I apologize to him. But he's done a deep dive into the study. Gideon MK, he goes by I think on Twitter. He's done a deep dive into the ivermectin literature and found that it's rife with shoddy, shady kind of figures and facts. So there you have it.
Yeah. I mean, people are like, ivermectin. Well, they're like, it's been used in humans for 30 years. I mean, that doesn't mean it's an effective vaccine. No one's saying.
No, I mean, penicillin. I hear this all the time. Like, it won the Nobel Prize. It's like, that's great. So, like, penicillin's wonderful too. A lot of things are wonderful. Water is great, right? Like, you can't live without water, but it's not a substitute for a vaccine. I could talk about how good water is, and it's not going to fill in.
Right. What's so strange to me about this is it feels like the same people who are very big into ivermectin are the same people who were first denying that COVID was real, that it was deadly, that it was, and like at every step of the way, it was like, COVID isn't this serious. We don't need to do anything. And now there's like this dangerous medicine to take to prevent COVID that at the beginning of this, they didn't think was real. And again, just the jumping over the vaccine.
It's still a very specific political purpose, right? So hydroxychloroquine was the same thing, right? That was what Trump and Republicans were sort of pushing. And why? Is there any particular reason why they particularly like that? No, it's because it was a reason to say, well, we don't really need to take this that seriously. We got this miracle cure that you can get for nickels. So, like, let's just not do anything. And then so ivermectin, again, even whatever the final analysis shows, it's played a similar role. It's basically played an identity politics, culture war, wedge issue role that has been very effective, apparently, which is sad.
Yeah, I trans species people, for people who horse identify. It's it's identity politics for the horse sign. The horse sign.
The equine set.
The equine set. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, I just want to give you the chance to respond to this. IVM is known to be safer than aspirin. There is zero reason not to give it. Only criminality. Wake up to what's going on here.
Look, again, I think this speaks to, it speaks to some of the issues we've talked about with, skepticism at pharmaceutical companies, skepticism at the medical establishment, and some of that skepticism is warranted, but the fact of the matter is that the evidence doesn't show clear evidence at all of benefit. As we learn more, it's looking shadier. Some of the studies that have been positive. The new study I mentioned that was very respected group is negative. And anyway, regardless of what you think about it, it's not a substitute for vaccination.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the most important point that I would
Right.
want people to take home.